So the next thing I'm going to demonstrate is how to create stencils with a closed value plan. So the steps leading up to this really help contribute to the success of the stencil. I'm going to talk about stencils just a bit here. So what are the advantages of using a stencil? A stencil is pretty cheap to make. Depending on what supplies you have on hand, it can be very, very easy to make. You really only need like a strong paper, like a cardstock. Even regular paper, if you're only planning on spraying the stencil a couple of times, will hold up to some spray paint pretty well. So it's a pretty accessible way of making art. It's a printmaking process, so you can use the stencil as many times as it will survive for to make an edition. You can repair them. So if it does fall apart in the process of you making it, whether like you cut too far or you spray it a whole bunch and a part is kind of getting like, I don't know, kind of like wobbly or something like that and warped, you can actually tape areas and recut them. So a lot of these stencils that are here have areas that have been taped. So this one, this part had fallen out, or they didn't remember to connect this part to the outer part, and so they taped it and recut it. You might be able to see it a little bit better on this side. So they taped both sides and then recut it. Same thing with these white ones in the back here. These are actually like cut by the Cricut, I believe. And so this part is taped here. This one is also taped up here. And so something maybe like fell apart there. And so you can tape it and recut it. It doesn't matter what the stencil looks like. That's not the art piece. It is a tool to make the art piece. So what it creates by being, either using spray paint or sponging paint over it, that is the art piece. The stencil itself doesn't have to look like anything special. In fact, the layers of spray paint that you end up putting over top of it, kind of contribute to its demise anyway. And so in the end, it doesn't really end up being the artwork itself. Although I will tell you, Shepard Fairey uses his stencils as art pieces, and I have had students present their stencil as the piece. But really, I think of that as more of like a cut paper piece. So anyway, why do street artists use stencils? Because spray paint can be applied to many different surfaces. They make spray paint for different types of surfaces, and so you could use a stencil and spray it with a spray paint that makes sense for the surface that you want to place it on. So what does that mean for our project? You could spray paint, if you have spray paint on hand and that's what you want to use and you want to create a stencil for this project, you could use like a found surface that you have. I've had kids use like doors that they had around in their house that just like were hanging out in the basement and weren't going to be used for anything, just like old doors. I actually had a student do like I think it was like a hot rod, like the hood of a hot rod, and he sprayed a huge life size, like real scale self-portrait of himself onto the hood of a car. So that was really impressive, and very resourceful of him to be able to get that. But anyway, so you could pick out a cool surface to work on. That's what it means for us. Okay, so the design of the stencil does have some limitations. So obviously it's a closed value design. There are some things that you can do with spray paint to create some gradation. And it does have, spray paint has an aesthetic where it gets kind of an overspray effect that some people really like. You kind of see it down here. This piece has a lot of kind of overspray in it. So there's different ways to control that, but it tends to be something that you kind of embrace about the process. The design of the stencil, you can use multiple stencils to remedy this, but as I was showing you that one stencil, okay, yes, the Buddha, so there becomes this implied line up here. They couldn't keep this line going because this was too fragile, because it wasn't attached enough to the outer part. And so they had to take what I call the island, this is like an island, and connect it to the outer part with a bridge. And so that happens sometimes and can be hard to design around, the idea that these parts need to connect to this outer frame. But when you do multiple layers of stencils, it becomes easier to make that work. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is show you the supplies that you'll need.